1. He is drunk, and you are crying, and you're both so scared. He kicks the door of the car down and gazes at the mangled woman lying still on the ground. She's dead, and her eyes are still frozen in the moment that her heart stopped. You stare through the shattered glass of the windshield at the warped silhouette of the man you met at a bar tonight, illuminated by the moonlight. He turns to you, and a shadow falls across his eyes. His face is drawn into a grimace, distorted by your hot tears, and he yanks open the door to the passenger seat. You are shaking your head and mumbling no over and over and over. His hands have a cold tremor as he drags you out onto the wet street. A burning lump rises in your throat. You struggle to force the vomit down. But as you look at this man, practically a stranger, you see your own fear, perfectly mirrored. Suddenly, he snatches you towards him, by your arm, twisting it painfully behind your back. You cry out in shock, and as your eyes glaze over, he snarls into your ear, "Don't tell anyone about this. Please, you can't tell anyone about this. I'll kill you. I'll fucking kill you. Do you hear me?" Sobs rack your bruised body. You mumble repeatedly, "I promise, I promise." Your pain is relieved, and he slams the car door. You're alone. Alone except for the girl in the black party dress with nowhere left to go. Then you run. You take off your high heels and throw them into the bushes and run. Your feet are bleeding, and your lip is torn in fragments of shattered glass, but you feel nothing. 3 days later, you stand on the concrete sidewalk outside of the police office with your legs shaking. As you ascend the steps to what you've been dreading with every bone in your body, you stop, biting the insides of your cheeks. 2. The boy with the curly red hair falling across his forehead stared into Piper's eyes. They were round and filled with a caring that only a beloved dog, nurtured by time and a family, could contain. Piper stood, and her bones ached with all the force of the hours she spent playing in the boy's yard or swimming in the pond across the street. The boy looked sad today. His normally shining eyes were dull and red from crying. Piper tenderly pressed her warm nose to his palm, and he smiled sadly. He revealed her faded red leash and clipped it around her collar. Piper wagged her tail, hoping for a walk or even a ride in his Jeep. The boy led her towards his car, but when she moved to jump in, she crumpled in pain. A whine escaped her as she struggled to rise to her feet again. The boy winced at her discomfort and carefully lifted her bony figure into the seat beside him. Piper had never sat in the front of the Jeep before. Her place had always been in the back seat. Normally, the boy played music loudly, and although it rang painfully in her now sensitive ears, she used to enjoy listening to him laugh and shout. This ride was silent. Piper was just glad to be in his company, however grim. She watched as her town flew by, just outside her window, full of familiar shops and restaurants. The world seemed sluggish and blurry. She was so tired. He rested his hand on her head and murmured words, softly, lulling her into a deep calm. She loved this boy with every ounce of her soul. When the car pulled to a stop, she gazed up at the steely building in front of them. Piper had been here many times, and not once had she enjoyed it. The smell of sickness wafted through the cramped waiting area, and by the time she was called to see a doctor, her weathered paws were sore with standing anxiously. She took her place on the doctor's table and heard a sniff from where the boy stood across the room. Piper didn't understand why he was sad, but sympathized deeply. The boy and the doctor shared a few words in low voices. The boy then crossed where Piper sat and bent down and held her tightly to his chest. He murmured an apology she couldn't understand, with a voice that resembled the same little boy that chose her from a litter of puppies what seemed like a lifetime ago. Integrity isn't just a word with a definition pulled out of a dictionary and used to classify the worth of someone or their actions. Integrity is a story with a three-dimensional meaning. It isn't always pretty. It can be gritty and cold. It can be trash bins full of tissues and nights spent crying when the right thing seems so undoubtedly wrong. Integrity can be something terrifying, or as heartbreakingly little as saying goodbye to a childhood pet. It isn't clean, but it's crucial, and it leaves you with a blank slate, a clean conscience, the ability to say, yes, I did say that. Yes, I did do that. And yes, I'm proud. Thank you.